All right. Well, hello and welcome to all of you that are downloading. I hope all of you that are downloading are going to be able to find a way that suits your schedule, so you can get into these classes. But welcome to all of you. I was, if I could fantasize, it would be nice to have a few million parents listening to this. It is one of the subjects in my life that has always moved me. I have always been involved with younger people in education almost from the time that I left my teenage years. Um, I have a deep and I guess very ancient anger at how much children are abused. And I don't mean about the obvious abuse. How they're abused by ignorance, the way they are seen, the way they are grasped, the way they are trained, the way they are homogenized, the way they're conditioned as beings. You see, one of the great tragedies is that when you have the privilege of being able to see the mechanics and to be able to see so clearly what the extraordinary potential is in any single human being, any single, and that to understand and grasp deeply that from the moment that being is going to come into the world, that everything that is supposedly there for that child to nourish it, protect it, guide it, are homogenized beings who are not self. And because of that, they are always going to have emptiness in them and lack of fulfillment. They will have all the negatives of whatever type they happen to meet. They will have relationships that are flawed. They will live according to the customs of their homogenized society, and they will raise their children accordingly. They will carry on the habits of the past. We know deeply that children that have to deal with physical abuse, that the chances are that they are going to abuse later in their life those that they love, those that are dependent on them. I mean, the responsibility is not in the hands of the children. The responsibility is in the education of the parents. Our whole process depends on that. I mean, when I was given the knowledge, I was given the way in which awareness can be attained naturally, and the fulfillment of life purpose can be attained naturally, and health and well-being can be attained naturally by entering into this world and being greeted by those that will treat you correctly and educate you accordingly. It's not the way I could start. I had to start with all those beings that were there about me who are all not self. That long process of creating what had to become some kind of, self-help thing. I mean, most of my career has been spent in just trying to decondition people, not spent with being able to provide for the deep well-being of children. Have to go through the adults first, have to get to the parents first. I mean, I've lived long enough and human design has done well in this life that I've been able to see it. That is, see parents who are aware, who are raising their children correctly, and it is something that is really remarkable. But it is a tiny, 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 tiny fraction of the thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of creatures that incarnate all the time. Here's one. This is a chart for today at the moment that I started the class on life incarnate. And it's really an amazing thing to be able to have the mechanics, to be able to see them, Because the moment that you have the mechanics, you have a way of understanding what is possible for your child and how to care for them. Literally, how to care for these beings. There's so many things to see. And each and every one of them provide a parent with a blueprint that allows them not to interfere with, but to support the process of somebody coming in on this planet. This child is a simple projector. And I mean simple, I mean that in the sense that there's only one definition. This is a self-projected authority. This is a very powerful identity. And yet as a projector, we know right away that it is a non-energy type and that it's deeply vulnerable. This child is deeply vulnerable to conditioning. And this child will naturally be conditioned. Most of the forces that will come in on this plane that are similar in this configuration will be deeply, deeply conditioned. Projectors are here to be invited. They're here to be invited into this life. This is their whole point. And there are so many things that we look at because it's not just simply what we see on the surface. The surface tells us so much. It tells us that this child has an open and vulnerable immune system, that they're going to be very clingy, and it's not about getting angry at them because they are desperate to hold on or afraid when you leave the room, because that's what an open spleen is going to bring. And it just says if you're going to have this child and you want this child to be safe and secure and content, put it in the papoose and hook it around your body and carry it around. Give it that sense of security that it's going to demand. It's also open emotionally, and there's all these possibilities that can activate its emotional system. It means it's deeply sensitive to the emotional frequency. If the child has a mother that's emotional, or the mother forms connections, a connection here or a connection here, or any of these three connections here that are going to define that solar plexus system, then this child is going to constantly be feeling the amplification of the emotions around him. We know very well that this mother, like all mothers, is going to go through something that is deeply draining both physically and psychologically in dealing with their infant in its first 9 months. The disruption in sleep patterns and eating patterns and all kinds of things that go on. And the very changes that take place in the chemistry itself. And it's one of the things to grasp that, this mother is going to go up and down on her emotional wave, or the father is going to go up and down in his emotional wave, and this child is going to take it all in and amplify. And when the mother's exasperated with the clinging baby, when she gets really upset, this baby is going to get really upset. There are things in the mechanics that don't just simply reveal that your baby's a projector and you invite it. But it is to be able to grasp that there is so much that is visible in the design that can be turned into tools and techniques that are used by parents in order to allow them to let things be what they are. It's so easy to let things be what they are when you see that that is correct mechanically. It's just the way it is. It's not like you can stop this child from being sensitive to the emotional world. Nor can you stop this child and its open heart center, wanting to control everything and thinking that it'll never be worthy until it can control things. There's all kinds of things that are here to watch. But there is a way to treat this child correctly. If we're talking about this as an infant, and it is, a newborn, then one of the most important things that we look at is the combinations that are there on the design side. Because they tell us two very important things about this baby. The most important of all is here. The design sun and the design earth, they represent our brain system. And what you're looking at here is you're looking at the color and the tone that are underneath the line of the specific gate. In other words, substructure information. What it basically tells us is that this color gives us what's called determination. And determination is the proper digestive process. One of the great plagues of the newborn is colic. And the vast majority of what is called colic by allopathic doctors is simply a byproduct of these babies not digesting correctly. We have 6 basic digestive systems that are actually evolutionary in nature. In other words, the first digestive system, which is called the caveman, the cave woman, is about eating one thing at a time. It's very primitive, and it's related to about 1 billion or so people on the planet. What we're looking at here in this 4th color is that we're looking at either a need for calmness or nervousness when one is eating. This happens to be nervous. Now you see, the digestive system, what is so essential is that when you digest food correctly, according to your determination, what basically happens is that no matter what you take in, because this isn't about food, it's not diet, it's not about whether it's good food, bad food, eco food, junk food, doesn't make a difference. The fact is that if you digest properly, either according to conditions or circumstances that are part of your design, then you're going to take precisely the nutrition that you need, and you're going to give that nutrition to those areas of your brain system that support your difference. This is what dietary regimen is about. A dietary regimen wasn't something that was intended to be given to 40 and 50 and 60-year-olds, which is the case today. Nothing to do about the way everything has to start. We have to start with adults that are conditioned. But it's intended for children coming into the world. It's intended to be their dietary regimen for life. It is what's going to give them the advantage of increased neural activity and neural expansion in their first 7 years. It's going to provide them with a healthy system that's going to be guided by a very strong and very healthy sensory system. Now, this child is nervous. And what nervous means is that this child is at its worst when everything is still and quiet and calm when it's eating. It needs a lot of activity going on around it. Itself, it needs to be active. Obviously it's going to be different as the infant matures into a child. But for example, this is a child that is never intended to sit still. It is not going to be easy to accept having to sit still in school. It's not easy to sit still during a meal. And as a matter of fact, for this child, it's unhealthy. These are the kinds of people, for every one of these dietary regimens, there's 2 variations. This is one of these people that, as they mature, eating while they're walking or dancing or, jumping up and down in the middle of the meal to do something else, and all these kinds of things are going to be the most natural and healthy behavior for them. Now you can see right away in my description of that there's a homogenized parenting code that would have real trouble with that. They would lash the kid to the table. They would tell everybody to be quiet so that they can have a peaceful meal. And, goes on and on and on. In the meantime, this is the worst possible thing for this child in the way it digests food. And what happens is that when you're not correct in terms of your dietary regimen, then you don't break down the nutrition in the way in which you're going to be supported in your difference and in your differentiation. In other words, support what is genetically intended for you to manifest. Instead, it's going to go all over the place. And basically what this does is that this leads to homogenization. So one of the first things that is so important with children coming into the world is being able to provide their parents with an understanding of what's the necessary dietary regimen for that child. Now, the second area is environment. Now, environment isn't something that is important for a child in terms of their life process until their Saturn return, until they reach their 30s. However, it is significant in many areas because it is about an environment that's healthy for them. This child happens to have the first environment, which is the cave environment. And the moment I see that in a child, there is a very simple thing that you can do that can relieve them of psychological stress. That is, cave people are the most secure in a room with one door, and that they can control the door. So many bedrooms are going to have at least two, sometimes three doors. If your child has its own bedroom and there's more than one door, then do something to camouflage them. Put a screen in front of them or whatever the case may be. And your child will have, very, very healthy sleep and feel very secure in their sleep. See, there's many things that can be seen that are enormous value to any parent in being able to understand what to expect and what to be able to do. The most important, in so many ways, regardless of the age of the child, is what's called variable. And variable is an extraordinary thing. These arrows, they're derived from these triangles, and in the triangle is what we call tone. It's the tone that really carries the cognitive architecture. In other words, we're designed to be cognitive creatures, this self-reflected consciousness, the way that we live this out. And what tone contributes is that tone contributes different ways in which our cognition is possible, and different ways according to these four themes that we have here. And these four themes become the steps in transformation for us. And when you're looking at these arrows are determined by the tones themselves. Some arrows pointing right, some arrows pointing left. Now this leftness and rightness is something that's very, very significant. And it particularly begins here. When we're looking on the personality side where the sun, earth is, this is where the mind is. Over here is the brain. Here is the perspective. Here is the environment. And here is the perspective. So we have four different cognitive components that are here in variable. Now if you look at the mind here, you can see that the mind is left. There's two possibilities for humanity. So fundamentally, if you look at the nearly 7 billion of us, half of us approximately are left-minded and the other half are right-minded. But there's a tremendous dilemma in that. That is, we live in a world that's dominated by left organization and homogenization. The seven-centered being that preceded us, the seven-centered being was purely strategic, in the same way that Neanderthal that preceded it was five-centered. Now we happen to be nine-centered. Seven-centered being, our ancestors, they were purely strategic. Everything was rooted in leftness. And the strategic is the way in which you organize your survival at a conscious level. In other words, it's what happened to us when we moved the splenic possibility of awareness into a mental process. The seven-centered being mastered mind, having the illusion that it controls everything. This is leftness. And what comes with leftness is a very deep focus. So when you're looking at this baby, you can see that this baby has a very focused mind. It's very focused. But think about the baby that has this arrow pointing right. Half of all the babies will have that arrow pointing right. It means they're right-minded. They don't fit into the world around them. The strategic baby will learn how to focus from its strategic parents, because that's the way they were raised and that's the way they were trained. But the right is not focus. It isn't. The way it looks at things is it looks at things as a periphery. It is receptive in its nature. Receptive. Which means that left children and right children learn differently. Very differently. Left children are able to go along with the strategic way that education is given, whether at home or in school. But the right child doesn't respond to that. They immediately feel uncomfortable and are forced to try to copy the strategic processes that they see and learn around them. They are never secure at the mental level, and they don't get the opportunity to show the depth of what it is to be receptive. A receptive mind takes in everything. If you have two babies in a crib, and one of them's left-minded and one of them's right-minded, the left baby is going to be focused on something. That gewgaw that's hanging down over there, and is going to be lost in that. This is the binocular vision of the way in which, mind finds its object, focuses on it, tries to control everything within the frame and remember. But the right baby sees everything. The right baby is taking it all in. It's taking in the whole environment, the whole atmosphere. It's taking in everything. Its developmental process mentally is intended to be very, very different. Very different. See, the right mind is to be trusting. Everything that goes in is there. You don't have to keep on focusing your child on learning something if it's already taken it in. You simply have to wait for it to be displayed, and it will be displayed. If you go to the other side and you look at leftness and rightness, this is the brain system. It comes to something else, one of those things that is always a concern of mothers in their relationship to their child, because it has to do with feeding itself. Not only is this about dietary regimen and what's correct for this child in terms of getting the proper nutrition, but it also is about quantity, food quantity. This child has a right brain. And literally what that means is that right brain does not need to be overfed. When you have a child with a right brain, you have to trust how much it wants of anything. You have to trust that. It's not about you dictating, you haven't had enough, have more, or you've had too little, It's not about you need more and all that kind of stuff. You have to see what it is. The right brain needs less quantity than the left brain. And so understanding what is the uniqueness of your child and beginning to trust in its form principle. Its form principle is born to be correct. It really is. You can trust that this child will not overeat or undereat. It will take in exactly what it needs. And because it's right, it doesn't mean that it's going to take it in when you want it to take it in. When you want to focus it on eating, it will let you know. You see, the moment that we can accept the correctness of our children, there is this assumption that our job is to mold them, to shape them, to turn them into something. What a horrible expression. It's about being present in their lives with love. It isn't about anything else. It isn't. It's all there. The responsibility of the parent is to be aware. This is what awareness is all about. Awareness is when you can let go of needing to consciously interfere. When you can just see. If you understand the basic mechanics of your child, you can watch it. It's amazing. I know. It's an incredible thing. And what it does for you as a parent is remarkable. First of all, it brings relief. Relief. There is only beauty there. It's what I see in every chart that I look at, is the potential of the beauty that's there. And most of my work has been dealing with people who've been so deeply conditioned that beauty is something that has just been lost. If a child is raised as themselves, the way we look at development changes. All of development up until now has been conditioning. You raise your children, you condition them. And then you offer them over to institutions that condition them. It's all conditioning. And of course, what comes with conditioning is this, assumption that you're doing the right thing, that this is the way your parents did it, or this is the way you're going to do it, or, they're going to be this and they're going to be that. Wow. It's already there. Let them unfold the way they were intended. They will. And you see, when you see the mechanisms and you see it demonstrated in them, it allows you to trust more and more in the obvious. This is the way it works. This is what parents have not been taught. And it's not enough for a parent to be given a blueprint of their child if they're going to be incorrect in their own process. This is the greatest dilemma. I mean, it's easy to do all of this because there's nothing to do. It's just about being aware. It's about taking fear out of your system. All parents, most parents, love their children. Can be deeply concerned and afraid for them and for themselves. I mean, it's part of what it is for us to have, awareness centers that are fear centers. Fear is part of our existence. And you see, once you can understand something and you can watch it and see it for yourself, and the child that is raised without conditioning is an extraordinary spirit. They are content within themselves because it's not constantly being pointed out to them that they need to be conditioned to be something else. That they're not going to stand in front of the mirror and wish they would be this thing or that thing or the other. They won't. The first interference of parents is to establish a goal for their child, whether it's conscious or not. This is the mystery. It's the magic of beauty, what an incarnated force is. That they're here to express something unique, something genuinely differentiated. And you can see what the homogenized world does with that. The first thing we do with that is slap all that homogenizing on. We're starting with it. So easy. All right, let me take you through a couple of steps. And just looking at the children guarding their time. And before I go on, for all of you that are listening to this, more important than anything else is to check out right or left-mindedness in your child. Because if you have a right-minded child, the sooner that you let them know and understand the way their mind works, the sooner you're going to save them from a lot of grief in this life. It is something that's very important, let alone raising a right-minded individual, truly understanding that your children, that your teenagers, that this is something that they're suffering from. You don't need to suffer from. All right. And just a brief look here. We take a look at each of the types and think about it. The manifestor is peculiar in that the manifestor has a unique strategy for childhood. And childhood is measured as long as you're living under the roof of your parents. So as long as you're part of the same penta, basically, that first family penta. And so it makes it very different. That isn't so for any of the other types. So there's obviously a deeply important component here for the well-being of manifestors that comes with their strategy when you're young, and it's about asking permission. I mean, the adult manifestor informs, and informing is very different from asking permission, because informing is not asking permission. It's just, my description of it is you're driving down the road and somebody's crossing the road and you honk the horn. That's informing. It isn't stopping the car, just honking the horn. But when you're looking at asking permission is placing oneself in a subservient role, and it is holding back one's power. It is not an easy strategy, and as such, it's never intended to be an adult one. In other words, it's really something that is the responsibility of parents to teach their manifestor children. I mean, the moment that you have a manifestor child, there's already a problem. It's in the aura of the manifestor child. It has got a repelling aura, closed and repelling aura. So there you are, a generator mother, which is very common, 67% of mothers. You've got a generator mother, and she has a manifestor baby. And there's the generator mother with her enveloping aura, and she has a baby that she can't really connect to. I mean, she can love it, obviously. But it is not like she feels that there's this strong connection. Now, in the not self, that physicality can lead to all kinds of really problematic psychologies in the relationship between the mother and that child. They may never get along. The mother might always be disappointed in them. There's all kinds of things. The other thing is that because it's a manifestor child, it is by impulse going to do things on its own. And of course, this is, where manifestors first meet punishment, is that, their parents are always controlling them. So not only can't you envelop, in that sense, your manifestor child, but you end up being frustrated with the fact that, you have to control them. And, if you don't understand these mechanisms, I mean, come on, all of you recognize where all that leads. It leads to a problem child, a problem relationship, and all the things that go with it. And of course, manifestors are here, as a chemistry. Their chemistry releases anger. This can end up being a very, very angry being. There's all the potential for problems that are going to arise, and all of that out of ignorance. Because look, if you understand that, it's nobody's fault. There's no blame. It's not like you point a finger at somebody because they happen to do this or that. You see it for what it is. You recognize that your child is a manifestor. And in recognizing that it's a manifestor, it is not going to reject love. It isn't. It's not going to be cuddly, but it isn't going to reject love, and it isn't going to deny love. It's just different in the way it works, because it is their nature that it's going to be. And they don't need to be punished. They don't. They need to understand that because they have power, they have to ask permission. This is one of the guiding rules for the manifestor, is being aware of impact as an adult. The impact is the lessons you learn from asking permission. You get to find out many things when you ask permission. Instead of seeing it as subservient, see it as a way of finding out many things. It's all about understanding your child. The manifestor child needs to feel its power. And at the same time needs to use its power in a way that will allow it in its adulthood to be able to get along with people. That's what asking permission trains. Being able to see that you can't always use your power, that sometimes you need to control your power. And it goes on, the way in which that operates. But again, it's something really just to See, at the simplest level, having a manifestor child, you cannot really, you know, tell them what to do. You have to develop a totally different way of communicating with them. Every child, every type, every configuration brings another technique that's possible to be able to create the best possible communication, and also to be able to maintain the well-being of whatever the rest of the elements there are in the design of this manifestor. But it goes back to the parents being aware. I mean, I know many mothers now who have manifestor children, and they've really come to appreciate what they are, because they're no longer caught up in all of the things that are there. As a matter of fact, I think it's more difficult to be a manifestor mother with a generator child than it is the other way around. I think that for the not self manifestor mother, being closed off in that sense from her children is very difficult, and always seems like it's a psychological problem, so it leads to a lot of overcompensation. I think, I think manifestor mothers suffer a great deal from not understanding who they are and the way in which they operate, because it would make it so easy for them. I mean, I had to learn that as a manifestor father. I mean, I have a deep connection to my children, and yet at the same time, I am a manifester. I mean, there's not a lot of access to me physically, these kinds of things. Yet at the same time, my children truly understand what I am. They understand the limitations of what I am because I've talked about it. They get it, and they know that it's not personal because they know that it doesn't influence or impact, the nature of the love that's there between us as a family. It has nothing to do with that. But it could have been, in ignorance. It always would have led to problems. I, as a parent, would have been seen in a very specific way and not necessarily in a positive way. And all of this is just a matter of ignorance. It isn't a matter of anything else. Generators. Every once in a while, I still get people who think their manifesting generator is somehow something unique and on its own. Some people have even suggested that it's a type, which I think would annoy the boys, because that certainly is not the case. And as a manifester, that's something that is always so obvious to me, is that regardless of whether a person is a generator or a manifesting generator, I get precisely the same impact. And I have a totally open sacral, so that really is my wisdom. Anyway, generators. A generator child. This is the most powerful being. This is the creature that is here to maintain life. Generators are a force of life on this planet. It's what they're all about. They're a generating life force. It's what it is to be a generator. And the generator child is not just simply very powerful, but its aura is very powerful. It is this open and enveloping aura. It really needs to take in the other. But the most important thing for a generator, from the earliest moments of their consciousness, is to help them grasp themselves. I mean, nothing more important. This know thyself, which was, literally created for generators. The sooner a generator understands their nature, the sooner they're going to make a contribution in this life, and it doesn't matter how old they are. This is really what it's all about, is to raise our generators well. We raise our generators well, we change the aura of the world. I mean, this is, it's an obvious. No, there are things that are very basic about the generator, but one of them is about, first of all, the nature of response, the responsibility of the parent not to tell these children what to do. And I know parents who shake their heads when they hear that. And actually, what I mean by that, because it needs to be qualified. I only have generator children. I have 3. I never started off telling them what to do. In other words, I would go through a ritual of asking. And Every once in a while, that asking would not be sufficient, and I would have momentary manifestor anger. But that's not really what the point is. The point is that the moment that you're always starting with asking, you're respecting the being. And not only are you respecting the being, but you are giving them the positive reinforcement they need as a generator. Because they need that. They need to be asked. The generator is refined through their recognition of correct stimuli. After all, they're here to respond, and they're here to respond to just about anything. So it is the quality of what they respond to that is so important for them. You know, when you're bringing a generator into the world, you're bringing a creature into the world that is not going to be complete until it knows itself. This is what a generator is about. You know, before the class we were talking about, impacting teenagers with the knowledge. And, the generator that knows itself, that knows the mechanics, is deeply powerful in impacting its peer group. I mean, everything about the generator and what it means for them. I'm always astonished. When generator baby comes into the world, this is one of those creatures that was born to have a life of ease. The generator is here to just purr through their life, like some well-oiled machine. I mean, this is what they're all about. This is their nature. And everything about them, is about whether they're ready to be surrendered creatures. It's very difficult to teach somebody who's conditioned and get them to a place to surrender. But these babies are born surrendered. And I don't mean that in a mystical way at all. They're born perfect. They're born perfect. If you're a non-sacral being, there's always work to do. Sacral beings are born perfect. They just screw it up. And it's not them. It's, the whole homogenized thing. Because everything for them is about never being conditioned to initiate. You don't condition your sacral child to initiate. You get them to respond. And when you get them to respond, they're incredible. The other thing is that you need to honor their sounds. No matter what their configuration is, and there are variations obviously, the vast majority of these sacral children are going to have very, very powerful primal sounds. They're their core to communication. And those are the sounds that in response are going to really be able to get you to the cleanest and most honest relationship that you can have with a child. It's what I say about, generator-to-generator relationships. No possibility for a more honest relationship than generator-to-generator. It's about asking each other to respond. And response is a very clean thing. Now, again, there are other factors, whether the child's emotional or not, and so forth and so on. But just talking about it from its basic theme, what it means to have that generator child. See, their whole development is based on what you offer them to respond to. It's extraordinary what you can do for them. And as long as they never get the conditioning that says they've got to manifest things, they've got to make things happen, all of them, they're going to be very healthy, very powerful, very, very content, forces satisfied. This is what it is to be a generator. The most important thing, physically, for generating children is this, homogenized infatuation with bedtimes. And generator children should never have fixed sleeping time. I know that for some families that would seem to be a burden, because, you work all day and you want to have peace in the evening and blah, 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 all that stuff. Generator children, you put a generator child to bed at 6 or 7 o'clock, and you're actually hurting them. mean that. That is, you're ultimately going to create sleeping problems for them. That's going to lead to other problems that are going to arise. It is so unhealthy for a generator. Generator is a motor. You know, it's this prime life motor, and it needs to exhaust itself. You know, it's one of the most important things to grasp. It needs to exhaust itself. So that child, you know, the image, the perfect image of a generator child at home is that they're in, let's say, a family room, and the adults are watching TV, and the generator child collapses while they're watching and falls asleep on the carpet. You know, this is perfect, absolutely perfect. So again, you know, one of the things that creates so much of the dilemma in being correct is, you know, homogenized conventions and generalities. You know, that it's unhealthy for your child not to have an early bedtime, that they need lots of sleep, and blah blah blah, and this and that, and whatever the case may be, and they shouldn't be staying up late, and all of that stuff. Well, when it comes to generators, it's really nonsense. I mean, it's nonsense. Not only just nonsense, it is, as I said, it is something that's really unhealthy for them. The truly content, well balanced generator, you know, has that exhaustion moment every day. That moment when they've simply had enough, they're finished, and they go to sleep. And it's an indication that they've used their energy well, because this is what's so important. And using their energy well brings satisfaction into their life. You want to manifest your baby that's at peace. You want to generate a baby that's satisfied. You want to generate a child and teenager that's satisfied. Just over 20% of children are projectors. And projectors suffer deeply from conditioning because they're designed to be conditioned, because they're not energy type. They have a very, very powerful focused aura. Most important thing for the parent, particularly an infant coming into the world as a projector, is that projectors are healthiest in one-on-one relationships. You know, so to really communicate with your baby, connect with your baby, it's very important that it's one-on-one. You know, not this scene where the baby sees two heads above its crib at the same time. It's actually quite disturbing to the projector's baby where to look, because they're really designed to focus on one thing at a time. Understanding that is something that's very important. Understanding that they're a non-energy type is also something important. But most of all, understanding that regardless of whether they're a day old or they're 8 or 15, they see things. They really see things. Projectors are here to recognize. They are. And they're here to be recognized. The projector child, you know, is calling out to be recognized for what it is. So it doesn't have to go through all that issue. And it recognizes you. I mean, the projector child, as it matures, you know, is ultimately the best guide for where the family is going to go and the family's direction, because it's inherent in nature. It's just something to grasp. And again, you have this waiting for the invitation. After all, you know, everything about the projector child is that things have to be presented to them. They need a great deal of stimulation, and they need those things that are really going to get their attention. And they're not a generator child where you hold a mirror up to them and tell them what you see in them. They're not. You give them a magnifying glass and you point it at someone else, and you say, look what you can see in there. Because this is what a projector is all about. A projector is here to master the world around it. It's here to focus and penetrate the world around it, so that it can add to its recognition skills. In other words, the projector child is a child that needs stimulation that connects it, you know, to the what's going on in the household, in the family, all of these things, in order for it to develop its skills. The other thing is, projector children, if they're invited into understanding or knowing or making sense of something, as long as it has a basic system to it, they will master it. Projectors are capable of recognizing and adapting to systems by design. Now, you don't want a bitter child. You want the sweetness of that projected child. You do not want the bitterness. And the bitterness is the moment that you place pressure on that child. And the pressure comes from so many ways, not just type. It's why any professional, any really well-trained professional in design, particularly at the rave psychology and primary health system level, can point out so many things that will allow you to free yourself of basic fears and concerns. Look at this child with the undefined throat center. You have no idea when this child's going to speak its first words. You don't. They might speak early, depends on conditioning. They might not be ready until much later, and there's nothing wrong. And there are so many things like that are visible in the chart that says to the mother, look, don't worry about this. You don't have to worry about this. And this is how you can help your child deal with this. It's all of these things. Every single piece of education about the nature of your child allows you the freedom to let them become themselves, to avoid the conditioning. Now, the reflective child. The thing that's so fascinating for me about the reflective child is that the really deep responsibility of the parent is twofold. One, obviously, is to feed this child correctly, because this is the most important thing involved with them receiving proper nutrition. But at the same time, to encourage their patience. Patience. This is one of the most important things for a reflector. And to understand that patience is its own reward. The kind of thing where you will do the same thing for an emotional child. Instead of saying to them, what do you want for your birthday? And, it's a couple of weeks before. You start that 4 months before. What do you want for your birthday? Think about it, process it. Or, you can do that on a cycle for your child. It's birthday, go back a full cycle of the moon before that birthday. That's the day that you ask that child, what would you like for your birthday? And don't make up your mind until it's just before your birthday. Go through the process. Watch what happens to you every day. Which things you think about, which things you think are great, which ones you think is cool, and so forth and so on, until you finally get to the point where you actually know. And the same thing is true for emotional children. I'm emotional. My sons are emotional. And I started training them in that when they were very young. I would always ask them at least a month before, what this or that they would like for whatever the thing was. And always told them, don't tell me right away. And of course, they would immediately say things right away. And I would just smile. And, a couple of days later, they would come and say, I've changed my mind. And it was a way of, teaching them what that means for them, that they need to process things, that they need to move through their time frame. And, if you don't understand this about your children, you've got a reflector child, and you try to push that reflector child to, do things quicker, to come to conclusions quicker, all that kind of stuff. It's not who they are. And it's only going to do damage. This is the integrity of a life, after all. It's what I'm so grateful for as a parent, aside from anything else. I remember what it's like. I had my eldest child when I was not self. And I remember what I was like as a father. And it's not something I'm proud of. It's not. I wasn't very good. I wasn't mean. I was living a typical not self-homogenized life. And when I think about the difference of what it's meant for me, my sons have come into my life since my experience. What a difference it makes to know who they are. All I do now is take pleasure in their process, and truly, that's what all I do. I mean, this is the wonder of it. And you don't have to deal with all these other things that end up being problems in families between parents and children, and the misunderstandings and the regrets and this and that and the recriminations and you ask most people, about their childhood, and you'll hear them blame their parents for things. I mean, it's just, it's one of these diseases of the homogenized world. No, this is something that is really very practical and very fundamental. It is something that, can be used at a practical level to make an enormous difference. But there is a prerequisite, and the prerequisite is the adult population. It isn't even that. It's more than that. There's so many people in the world that are into human design. But it's about couples. It's about couples being into it together, being correct together, having a relationship that is, a proper relationship, one that is truly correct in the way in which it functions. I mean, that's the foundation for making a difference in a child's life. It really is. I mean, again, I've been around this long enough to have seen these things. Couples that are very aware of their own nature, working on their process of their relationship through this lens, and being able to bring this to their children. I mean, this is where the future is of this knowledge. And it's why, we continue doing what we do, which is try to break the surface with as many adults as possible in the hope that, it will impact their children or their grandchildren and begin to make a difference in the way in which young people are nurtured in this life. The parents, the rest is there. The blueprint is there. All the information that you need is there. It just simply goes back to whether the education is going to be there and the commitment to the knowledge is going to be there. Well, as I said, this is a subject that is very important to me. And, like all of these things, you have to wait. It takes time. What I know is that the professionals that are out there in human design every day, they're changing somebody's life. And that in the end is going to change the life of children. It's the way it has worked, it's the way it will continue. But it's about remembering whenever you have that kind of contact with somebody who's ready. This is for their children. And it will give them great pleasure to be able to fulfill their responsibilities as a parent in a way that is, is fulfilling and fruitful. It's such a beautiful thing. So it's something to let people know about. All right, and to all of you, thank you for those of you that are in the class, and to all of you that are downloading. Again, these classes have been shifted to this time zone, so it will be again at the same time next week at 20 GMT. Look forward to seeing you all then. Bye for now.